It's the start of January, and that commonly means it's time for the National Championships. Over the weekend of the 8th and 9th of January, 15 nations will hold their national championships. So this week I'll tell you everything you need to know for all of these races, from the biggest races in Belgium and the Netherlands to the smaller ones in Portugal and Luxembourg. On the 8th of January we get the first two sets of national championships. Without a doubt the bigger of the two is the Czech National Championships, held this year in Kolín. This year the championships consist of just elite races for the women and men. The course in Kolín is one that is used semi-regularly in the Toy Toy Cup. This place looks pretty fast and technical, a fairly standard Czech course. The ground seems to be quite slick and sticky, but it's not very muddy. It reminds me a bit of Hammer, a little bit of Tabor as well. It's quite standard for a Czech course. The Czech have a history of being amongst the leading nations in cyclocross, with riders including former world champions Radomir Šimonek and Zdeněk Štýbar. The level, however, is nowhere near what it was a decade ago, but nonetheless the racing here should be pretty competitive. On the women's side, it's still a bit of a guessing game as to see who exactly will be racing. Kristina Zemanova is the highest ranked rider in the UCI standings. She's swept up in Eastern Europe, taking 8 wins, but Zemanova is still only 18 years of age. Nikola Bajarova is the highest ranked elite rider, depending on if Zemanova rides or if she ventures somewhere else. Of course you have the old guard as well. Katarina Nash probably won't ride, but who knows, she might. Defending champion Pavla Havlíková will presumably turn up, but I don't really know if she's still got it in her tank to defend that title. On the men's side, the overwhelming favourite is defending champion Michal Boros. Expect Adam Tupalek and Tomáš Paperžka to push him close though, maybe also Matej Stransky. The Czech nationals will be broadcast live in the Czech Republic, doing so on Česká televize, the Czech national broadcaster. The other country hosting their nationals on the 8th is Luxembourg. The Luxembourg National Championships will be held in Ettelbruck in the north of Luxembourg. The day will consist of junior, under 23 and elite races. The course looks to be, completely honest, quite underwhelming, but then again Luxembourg aren't a big player on the world stage. The course seems quite fast, it's very dry, there's a few little things added, but it's largely just a race in a field. This place makes Ruckfen look like Namur. It's not really that entertaining. This little washboard section is quite cool though. As ever, the favourite for the women's race has got to be Christine Majerus. The 11-time cyclocross champion will almost certainly defend her title once again. However, the youth is coming. Marie Schreiber is a pretty exciting prospect. The Tormans youngster could be the first rider in a while to threaten the Majerus dominance. On the men's side, God knows really, I don't really know anyone. Rafael Kokkelman put in an incredible performance on the Koppenberg earlier this year to finish in 11th place. But other than that, I don't remember seeing him at all. I'd call him the favourite, I think. Scott Thieltjes won a race here at this circuit in November, so he could be a good guess. Maybe Cedric Pries, but I don't really know who that is that well. I'm not sure if this race will be broadcast anywhere. I'd be quite surprised if it was. I couldn't find any information either way though, unfortunately. Now with the 8th of January done, on to the 9th, and we'll start in Austria. The nationals this year will be held in Pernitz in Austria. Pernitz is a host of regular cyclocross races and is even a host of the nationals last year as well. This year we'll see a junior men's race and elite women and men categories. The women will start at 12:32, 2 minutes after the men juniors, which frankly I think is farcical. Even more so when you consider that the only Austrian crosser to have achieved anything ever is a woman. The Pernitz course is kind of weird. It's pretty technical with some height differences, a few tricky climbs. It reminds me a bit of Besançon, Zolder as well a little. It's not a great course, but it has some decent elements in it. In the women's race, this will almost certainly be the Nadja Heigl show. The former under-23 World Championships podium sitter is an 8-time Austrian champion, and I can't really see anyone coming close to her. The men's race should be a bit closer. Daniel Federspiel is the defending champion and should go well again. I expect Gregor Regel and Philipp Heigl to probably be his closest competitors. Again, there is very little information online available about this race and whether it will be broadcast or not. I'd again venture towards no, but you never know. And now the big one. The Belgian Nationals will be held across the weekend, with the women on the 8th and the men on the 9th. This year's championships will be held in a place of cyclocross royalty, sort of. Middelkerke is home to the Noordzeecross, one of the most historical races on the cyclocross calendar, historically part of the Super Prestige. However, these Belgian championships will be held slightly further down the road at the military complex of Lombardzijde. The new course is somewhat inspired by the recent World Championships in Oostende and the World Cup in Kokzijde. The main thing this course has is dunes and sand, and honestly, it looks really good. This course looks incredible, and it's probably the best racetrack of this year's national cycle. 12-time champion Sarah Kant comes into Middelkerke with the same clouds hanging over as she did last year. Kant has struggled in recent years, the same again this year, but she's picked up decent form over Christmas, getting numerous top 10s, so she's still the out-and-out favourite. Belgium's female cyclist of the year, Lotte Kopecky, will be hoping to compete as well. She took a surprise second last year and will be hoping to push Kant again. Keep an eye on Alicia Frank and Marion Nobert-Riberol as well. On the men's side, this will presumably be the Wout van Aert show again. Wout has been borderline unstoppable this year and comes into this as the overwhelming favourite. Former Belgian champion Laurens Sweeck has had a pretty poor year by his standards, but historically he's been the best in the sand of all this lot, so expect him to go well. And then of course you've got the usual cast: Iserbyt should do well, same for Hermans, Aerts, Van Toerenhout, etc. I'd venture towards calling this one the race to watch of this Nationals weekend, and it will be live on Sportza, the Belgian national TV broadcaster. Sportza is also available online via the VRT website. You'll need a VPN, however, if you're not in Belgium. From one big one to another, the British Nationals should be amongst the better races of this year. Crawley is a regular host to the British National Trophy Series, and this year gets the honour of hosting the battle for the red, white and blue. This year we'll have junior categories and the elite races, of course. The course is pretty typical for British cyclocross. It's quite flat, it's quite quick, lots of long sweeping corners. There's a few pretty decent drops, run-ups and off-campus though. It's quite a nice course. If it rains, this place could actually be quite good. It feels a bit like Ruckven or Besançon. In the women's race, you'd hope it's finally time for Anna Kay to take the jersey, having missed out on it in previous years due to all manner of things. Most recently, of course, the pandemic. Kay comes into this race as the best female British crosser, but her season hasn't been amazing after being interrupted due to a training crash earlier in the year. The course does suit her quite well, however. Her biggest rivals would ordinarily be defending champion Harriet Harnden and mountain bike superstar Evie Richards. Harnden has recently returned to cross, putting in some pretty okay performances, whilst Richards would have done the same if not for a bout of illness. I can't say for certain if either will race. I'd venture to say Harnden yes, Richards no. In the event that neither of them race, I'd say that Team Spectra's Amira Meller is probably the next best rider, but Kay should be able to win that one quite convincingly. On the men's side, defending champion Tom Pidcock will not be racing. After completing the XPO Trophy in Herentals, Pidcock will go on a training camp, aiming to become world champion in Fayetteville. This will open the doors for Ben Turner, Cameron Mason and Thomas Mean to fight it out for a national title that none of them would have expected necessarily at the start of the year. My pick of the bunch is probably Cameron Mason, but the other two absolutely stand a good chance as well. The British Nationals will be available live on Eurosport GCN, so check them out for the broadcast. Denmark is a country with not that much cyclocross history or pedigree. However, the course where the junior, under-23 and elites will ride on the 9th of January in Aarhus is nothing short of bizarre. The course is on an outdoors velodrome with some tight corners, using the stands of the velodrome to create a staircase. There are large asphalt sections, some pretty cool bits, and other bits that seem totally bizarre. This tunnel, for example, is pretty freaky. Personally, I love the look of this little sand section near the back end of the course. I really don't know what to make of this thing. Like, it's hideous, but I think I kind of love it. Caroline Beurs won the past 3 cyclocross titles in Denmark. so expect her to perform quite well again. Sophie Heby Pedersen is probably good competition, but I don't really know that for sure. The main rider I'd focus on the men's side is Sebastian Finny Carstensen. He is a mountain biker, pretty decent at that, and he's a 4-time national champion. Jonas Lindberg is probably his nearest rival. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find any information about this race being broadcast, which is a shame because I really want to see this course in action. And now it's time for another big one. Back amongst the big ones, the Dutch Championships were due to be held in Zaltbommel, but a ban on crowds meant that the race couldn't happen there, and thus it was moved to Rukven, host of a World Cup round earlier in the year and host of the most recent nationals in 2020. Now, the Dutch will be hosting 2 races, a women's race and a men's race. Both will be handing out under 23 and junior titles as well though. So this brings me to the question of what would happen if an under 23 rider wins the whole thing, because in both races that seems like a somewhat real possibility. Rukven is a course that should be fairly familiar to most. It's flat, it's fast, it requires a big engine. There are some good technical sections, but the most important factor will be the barriers just before the final corner. As we saw earlier in the year, the race can be won and lost on these barriers. Lucinda Brandt comes into this as the overwhelming favourite. The world champion is on incredible form right now, on a crazy winning streak, and this course suits her pretty much perfectly. However, the women's field is obscenely deep in the Netherlands. Marianne Vos won the World Cup here earlier on, but she seems to not be in the best form right now. So, you know, but then again, she's Marianne Vos, so chances are she'll win anyway. After that, you've got the rest, which include Denise Betsema, Celine Alvarado, Annemarie Worst, Pieterse, Kastelein, Van Empel, Van Anrooy, Bakker, Van der Heijden, Van Alphen, and the list goes on. On the men's side, it's a question as to whether Mathieu van der Poel will ride or not. If he does, it's basically game over. If he doesn't, there's a huge chance to become national champion for Lars van der Haar and Corné van Kessel. I don't think either of them will get this chance ever again, to be completely honest, so they will be gunning for this. I think Pim Ronhaar is young enough that his peak years won't fall under Van der Poel's reign, but even Pim could be eyeing that elite title and wondering how many more chances he'll get. The Dutch nationals are available online and potentially on TV. They'll be done by the NOS, and local broadcaster Omroep Brabant is doing a broadcast as well. The French nationals are a bit of a dark horse as far as importance is concerned. Generally, the French aren't a leading nation in cross, but this year's nationals are going to be held in Ливен, a circuit that will host the 2025 Cyclocross World Championships. The men race an under-23 race on Saturday, but everybody else will race on Sunday. This racing will be done on a course that is pretty quick, but with some little climbs in it as well. It's just a very typical, traditional mid-2000s cross course, I think. It reminds me of Hoge Heide a bit. The battle in the women's race could be pretty good. I don't expect too much from defending champion Amandine Fouquenet. Her season hasn't really gone to plan so far, it seems. She's been outclassed a little bit by others, but she could still do well. The real battle should be an interesting two-way one between 2 riders of the AS Bike team. Helene Clauzel has been consistent all year round, hanging in at about the top 10 in many major races. She's 10th in the World Cup overall as well. Her big rival will be French mega talent Line Burquier. Burquier has ridden 5 crosses in the World Cup this year and showcased bundles of talent every time. And at just 18 years old, the French woman is really good for the future. But this year it might still be a step too far to be national champion. On the men's side, Clément Venturini should be the big favourite. The Age Desert man returned to the top end of cyclocross for the first time in half a decade in Hulst, immediately finishing as the best French rider in 20th. Venturini has won 4 of the past 5 national titles, but could face competition from other road riders. Both Anthony Turgy and Lilian Calmejean have a history of racing the nationals, but expect the nearest challenger to probably be Joshua Dubos. The French nationals will be broadcast on Eurosport GCN, however this will be done with only French commentary. Germany is another country splitting its nationals over the weekend. Much like Belgium, the women will be on the 8th and the men on the 9th. This year's championships will be held in Luckenwalde, near Berlin. I haven't been able to find a 100% confirmed layout for this one, but the area seems to be quite quick but quite sandy as well. It seems pretty technical and quite fun to ride on. A bit like Zonhoven Light is how I describe it. Major favourites on the women's side will be four-time champion Elisabeth Brandau. Brandau, however, hasn't had the best year so far. She hasn't raced much, and when she has, it's not been sparkling. 20-year-old Judith Kral could be the youngster to dethrone Brandau, with a spate of OK performances over Christmas and 2 victories early in the year. Also keep an eye on youngsters Ronja Eibel and Claire Zeidel. Since Philipp Walsleben left cyclocross, Marcel Meissen has won every national championship. The German may no longer ride for Alpecin Phoenix, but he is still overwhelmingly the favourite to defend his title. Expect Sascha Weber to put up a decent fight. Last year's runner-up Manuel Müller could again go well too. The German nationals I don't think will be broadcast anywhere. I couldn't find anything at least. Next we head over to Hungary, the newest country on the map of elite cyclocross. This year the Hungarian nationals will be held in Kossuth-Barcika on a course that looks pretty flat, technical and a bit boggy in places. Some sand to spice things up too. It reminds me a bit of the American crosses, Waterloo, Iowa City, a bit like them ones. The women's race, honestly, you think it might not even need to be held. It's not a question of who will win, but it's a question of by how many minutes will Blanka Vash win. Something would have to go really wrong for Vash to be in normal SD Works colours by next week. If anybody were to compete, I guess it might be Regina Schmidl. She's the only other rider with UCI points. The men's race could actually be quite exciting, if only because I don't really know what to expect. Zoltbeur is the defending champion, but the highest ranked Hungarian on UCI points is a man called Balázs Silvester. Outside of those two, of course, members of the Vash clan will probably do okay. Balázs Vash, the older brother of Blanka, is a 2-time national champion in his own right, and I think Balázs and Blanka might be the only brother-sister pairing to hold national titles at the same time. But I believe Balázs no longer races. Younger brother Barney Vash certainly does though. He won earlier on this year in Niel in the Newlinger race. The youngest Vash is still very much a child though. I think he's like 15, so I doubt he'll race this one and I doubt he'll win. But who knows, it would make quite the good story. The Hungarian Nats were broadcast on YouTube last year, so I think they might be again, but I don't want to say that for sure because I found no confirmation whatsoever. The Irish Nationals will be held in Armagh in Ulster, on a course that seems again pretty standard for cross in the English speaking world. Pretty flat, pretty simple, on a small hill. This place looks quite boggy though. It's a bit like Kruijbeek if anywhere. Maria Larkin is the defending champion on the women's side and probably the favourite heading into this race, sitting highest on the UCI points ranking as well. The 34-year-old competed in some early season crosses in the USA, including the World Cups, doing quite well in some of them. Expect the young duo of Roisin Lally and Darcy Harkness to put up a decent challenge though. On the men's side, the only Irish crosser I know, Sean Nolan, will be attempting to become national champion for the first time. Nolan has ridden a busy calendar in Belgium this year, competing in many of the big races. The learning curve may be steep, but this experience could put Nolan a cut above. He'll have to do well to unseat 2-time champion David Conroy, however. Expect last year's runner-up and best Irish finisher at Ireland's biggest cross in Clonmel, Christopher McGinchley, to go quite well as well. The Irish Nationals will be broadcast live by the Irish Independent this year. The Italian Championships will be held in the northeast of the country at Variano di Basiliano, on a course that to me most resembles the OG Namur layout, like the original one from 2008 in the GVA Trophy, and that's including the crazy long staircase. This course is pretty hilly. It includes a handful of sketchy drops and off-camber sections. Considering a lot of Italian crosses are mountain bikers too, it seems pretty apt. Eva Lechner will want to reclaim the national title that she lost to Alice Maria Azzuffi last year. Lechner has probably been Italy's best rider this year, an impressive 4th place at Val di Sole being the highlight. Azzuffi herself has been pretty decent this season too, and so have the youngsters Gaia Realini and Silvia Persico. On the men's side last year the battle came down all the way to the line with Guye Bertolini and Jacob Dorigoni. Bertolini won that race and he won the jersey. The two of them however have been basically joined at the hip ever since. Either could become champion by next week. Youngsters Davide Toneatti and Filippo Fontana could go well as well. The Italian nationals will seemingly be broadcast live on Rai Sport. Now on to the only country on this list where I know literally nothing. This year's nationals in Portugal will be held in the north in Santo Tirso, on a course that's actually not too bad. It's quite quaint, but it's hilly, it's got some good off-cambers, 3 nice little drops, and it also has this cool section where they run through an amphitheatre. It reminds me a bit of the Munich Supercross, if anywhere. The big favourite to win this race will be Ana Santos. She's only 20 years old, but she's already a triple national champion. Her main rival will be Marcia Salvador, the only rider with UCI points. On the men's side, Mario Luis Miranda Costa and Vitor Santos fought out the last title, and I'd imagine they'll do the same again. Again, I couldn't find any broadcast information on this one, but it's probably the smallest race on the list, so I'd be surprised if this one was live. The Spanish nationals will be held in Xàtiva, a fairly young course near Alicante and Valencia. I was able to find 2 layouts for this course, an older one and a newer one. I think, unfortunately, the newer one is going to be used. It's very sandy, it's quite flat, and it's nothing on the old one. The old one was this insane Spanish sort of rampas inhumanas thing, followed by a massive long sandy grassy descent. It looked incredible. Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be quite flat, lots of sand, quite technical, could be a good watch, but it's nothing compared to the old one. Lucia González Blanco is the defending Spanish champion and probably the favourite to win again. She also has won here in Xàtiva twice in the past 2 years. Her big rival should be Aida Nuno Palacio, who won the inaugural edition of this race. Alongside those two, however, Sara Cueto Vega has looked quite solid recently, so she could go quite well as well. Felipe Orts should be the favourite to defend his title again in the men's race, but Kevin Suarez has put out some pretty solid performances recently, so you can't count him out either. I have an outside hope that Gorka Izaguirre might race here, but I would be very surprised. The Spanish nationals are usually available on YouTube. I think sportpublic.tv will be the channel you want to follow for these ones. And finally, the last national championship to talk about is one of a historical cyclocross heavyweight. In keeping with this historical heavyweight theme, the Swiss nationals will be held at Steinmauer, a race steeped in history, with winners including Roland Liboton, Paul Herreigers, Richard Groenendaal and Klaas van Turnhout. Steinmauer generally is an independent race that pulls some pretty decent riders. I mean, look who won here last year. Look at that. The course has a lot of climbing, some technical little drops, and it's January in Switzerland, so I'd anticipate it might snow a bit. Jolanda Neff is probably the best Switzerland has to offer, but I doubt she'll ride here, she hasn't in the recent years. Instead, look out for defending champion Nicole Koller. Her main rival should be Zina Bahumi. Maybe young mountain bike protege Jacqueline Schnebly can do well as well. On the men's side, I predict Kevin Kuhn will defend his title, though we'll have a few good rivals. Timon Roeg is on good form, and Loris Rouillet finds a smaller, punchier course that fits him quite well. Also keep an eye out for last year's runner-up, Lars Forster. Unfortunately, I've not been able to find a place that this race will be broadcast. Switzerland are a fairly big country though, so maybe it will be, but I don't know for sure. And with that, we are done. 30 races in 15 nations, one giant comprehensive guide. I hope this explains everything you need to know, and enjoy the weekend.